Friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Rob Donaldson. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's over on Underdog Fantasy, and we're going to chat with him about the fact that we've got so many players that decide to not go into the NBA draft, return to school, what it means for those teams, what it means for the sport in general. We're also going to talk about the fact that we've got the 5-year rule that is currently under consideration from the NCAA. They're going to be discussing that more next month, and how many teams might be needing that because they've struck out here in the offseason. Looking at you, Kentucky, who's going to be mentioned here in a minute or two because we saw the number 1 recruit decide where he's going to be going to school. Kentucky was very much hoping and praying to be able to land one Mr. Tyran Stokes, and they did not land him, so we're going to be talking about that, and we're also going to be talking with Rob about a few teams that he's liked what they've done here in the offseason. In the final segment, going to give you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Tuesday, other than the big one, which we're going to be addressing here in segment number 1, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, and I beggeth you, I pleadeth you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. The big news is Tyran Stokes. He's the number 1 recruit for the 2026 class. 6'7", little bit of a do-it-all player, nice scorer. I don't know if he's Darren Peterson level of scoring, but I feel like he's a much more complete player. He decides that he is going to be going to Kansas. For Kentucky, they tried to make a little bit of an ancillary move to be able to help things out. They are going to be getting Justin McBride, who averaged 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, shot 40% from 3 at James Madison. That's a solid ad, but instead of getting the number 1 recruit, you get a guy from James Madison. I know that I'm putting it in simple layman's terms, but I mean, that's rough for Kentucky to say the least, and this is big for Kansas. Now, for Kansas, I know that it's big that they land Stokes. I still think that they need to add more in the transfer portal because they also have Taylon Kinney that's coming in. He should be good at the guard spot, but there are guys that they've added here in the offseason. You've got Keno Dawes, who comes over after he was at Utah, give you about 8 or so rebounds per game, but not necessarily a polished offensive player. Right now, Christian Reeves and Paul Mbia is a freshman / a guy that just really didn't see a lot of playing time. And then for Reeves, he was over at College of Charleston, couldn't get out there on the floor a few years ago over at Clemson. Those are your main big men. Stokes is sort of that 6'7" wing, do-it-all sort of player. And then they bring in Leroy Blyden, who was a solid scorer over at Toledo, but as we know, Toledo plays absolutely no defense whatsoever. I feel like the work here is not done for Kansas, and even though they land Stokes, I still feel like it's been a little bit of an underwhelming offseason for them. The good news is they're not Kentucky, and they're not LSU. Like for LSU, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment with our good friend Rob Donaldson, they currently have Mohamed Diabate on the roster. They also have Mohamed Diabate on the roster. Looks down at screen. They have Mohamed Diabate on the roster. If you notice, yes, I did say that they have Mohamed Diabate on the roster 3 times because that's currently all they have. I don't know how this has happened, but LSU currently doesn't have a roster. They have really struck out on pretty much everyone whatsoever. For Kentucky, they certainly have as well. Getting McBride is nice, but when you have Zoom Diallo is right now probably your biggest ad via the transfer portal, that's a little bit of a rough situation for you. So, for Kentucky, it's been underwhelming. There have been a few teams in general that it's been interesting. Louisville's obviously stepped up, and we'll talk about some of the teams that have stepped up in the next segment, and obviously these teams that have returning players. Like UConn has a lot of the roster returning, Florida has a lot of the roster returning, Michigan bringing back Elliot Cadu, having the ads like JP Estrella that they've had. That's been very good for them, but man, you do have to wonder there, but big news for Kansas being able to add Mr. Stokes, and what I am not stoked about is I do have to mention this as well. It's looking like the steps are being taken to expand the NCAA tournament to 76 teams, and That would mean that in all likelihood, there's probably going to be some tinkering with this. All the 15 and 16 seeds are going to need to play their way into the NCAA tournament. That's going to be absolutely terrible. You might have a little bit of a split. Maybe it's like the 16 seeds and some of the just 12 and 13s. It's a wait and see approach with this regard, but man, this is just not what you wanted to see. Like, who was sitting there thinking, oh, after we had such a difficult time being able to scrap together 68 teams this year, everyone was like, oh, SMU, Auburn, Oklahoma, who deserves to be in? And it was a big giant pile of slop. Now all those teams would have been very, very safe into the NCAA tournament. Like, who's calling for this? And there are some people who are saying, oh, this will help out the mid-majors because we've seen some of them not be able to get in the NCAA tournament. Allow me to share with you a secret that's not a secret. Do you really think they're looking out for the mid-majors here? Answer is absolutely not. They are going to be utilizing this to get in some garbage 6 and 14 team from the SEC, Big Ten, insert your favorite conference you're in, and they're going to continue to give the screw job, I think is the proper way of putting it, probably the most polite way I could put it too, of the teams like Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin who won 25 plus games, UNC Wilmington who won 25 plus games. Those are the teams that are still going to get the almighty shaft while they put in the power conference team, so not necessarily thrilled about that. If you are, congratulations. I think that I'm talking to maybe 2 people that are listening to this podcast who are thinking, oh boy, 76 teams in the NCAA tournament, how swell. I don't think there's many other people. Mike Leach would love it. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. I still remember he wanted the 64-team college football playoff, and I think that he proposed a loser's bracket. And if this came with a 76-team loser's bracket where like Mississippi Valley State would be the 1 seed of the loser's bracket, then you know what? I might be a little bit all for it. We would be getting a lot more college basketball, but unfortunately, we are not getting that. So we are having ourselves some NCAA tournament expansion, and we're always looking on this podcast to expand out to great guests. Rob Donaldson, he does great work over at Underdog Fantasy. He's one of the best. He joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy. His YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. At this time of year, he's doing a great job giving out baseball bets. When we get in the college basketball season, he does a great job on that front, but he really does an amazing job looking at this great sport all 12 months of the year. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And I'm glad we're still doing this every single week because college basketball right now, with the NIL, with coaching additions, with the NBA draft, with everything that goes on in this sport, it truly never stops or slows down. And if you try to pick up everything, back in, the back end of September, early October or November, I wish you the best of luck. There's a lot of different changing, moving parts in this sport right now.
Oh, there certainly is, including the NBA draft decision. So fewer moving parts with this year's NBA draft decisions. 71 underclassmen declared. That is as low as it's been since 2003, so in over 2 decades. And just what do you make out of so many of these guys, like Thomas Halla going back to Florida. We saw quite a few of the Duke guys like Caleb Foster, Patrick Ngangba decide to return to school. What do you make out of it? Because it really does feel like anyone that was on the fringe decided that they were going to head back to college.
And honestly, I'm a big proponent of it because where NIL, I think, finds its faults, it's like the continuity aspect as college fans and really just having, the ability to build up a team from freshman to senior to see the player growth and see the guys who waited on the bench finally get their moment. Now, because of NIL and the ability to transfer at free will without any restrictions, it kind of opens up, hey, go to where you get playing time, where you also can balance getting some payment, in form of the NIL. And so what I do really like about the NIL is the NBA draft side of things and players leaving the college game to jump to that next level, because kind of to your point that you just mentioned, only 71 players entered the 2026 NBA draft. That's one of the lowest. In 2021, it was 363 players. And what that means is that the talented players in this sport from 18 to about 24 years old are staying within the college game. And that just leads to some high level basketball that honestly we have never really seen before.
Yep, it's absolutely wild what we've seen there, and I do feel like there have been just a lot of teams that have benefited from it. I mentioned Duke, I mentioned Florida, Michigan certainly has quite a few guys coming back with Elliot Cadu and company, and I do think that it's a big benefit to these guys, but now we also do find ourselves in a spot right now where the 5-5 rule is starting to gain a little bit of traction. I don't know what that means for the guys above the age of 24, because I know there are many of those guys like Antoine Jones who would be playing in his 9th year of college basketball. I'm not even kidding when I say that. Currently in the transfer portal, but that said, it feels like we could be coming to a head to where we just have a lot of talented players in general across the board, especially if that 5-5 rule gets passed and we get more eligibility for some of those guys.
And this is an ever evolving sort of thing, because eventually there's going to be a meta in terms of how these teams build up their roster. There were some coaches, whether it was college football or college basketball in the early, season of the transfer portal or the NIL circuit, where they're just like, you know what? Our guys are loyal. We're just going to have our guys, forget the portal. We're going to still build the exact same way and kind of buck the system. Well, those guys have completely almost kind of gotten pushed out of the fold of contention on the national championship level. And now they've kind of said, well, hey, you have to have a balance. That was the first adjustment to the meta of the transfer portal, of NIL becoming prevalent. And now with how many guys enter the transfer portal and with how much money is being floated out there in the transfer portal, to your point, there's an excess amount of talent. But I think that again, kind of the adjustment or the meta that we're going to start seeing in future years is some of these really talented guys playing at a school to really showcase their talent and build up their portfolio or their value as a player within the college game. Not necessarily saying, hey, I want to go to Kentucky or Duke or, one of these top end schools to eventually just jump to the NBA after 1 or 2 years. It's going to be like, hey, we can carve out a serious career making millions within the sport of college basketball. And you can feel however you want to feel about that, but it's happening. And eventually, again, there's going to be kind of that bolstering up of your own value rather than just kind of being the 7th man off the bench.
Yep, no question about it. And I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of these guys that decide to return to school, because now we're seeing these guys older and older going into the NBA draft. Used to be where it was like, if you were above the age of 20 years old, you were anxious going into the NBA draft. So we certainly have seen a shift there, as Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's the Best Bets. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with a lot of these NBA draft decisions having come and gone, it also means that fewer guys that were on the fringe of the NBA draft, there's going to be fewer guys who are testing the waters. They're going to be hopping into the portal. And how do you look at some of these teams that, quite frankly, have struck out thus far? Because with LSU, they signed Mohamed Diabate, which is great, and I believe that Mohamed Diabate is right now in the entire roster. We did see Kentucky get on the board with McBride coming over from James Madison, but other than the Stokes sweepstakes, they've really been striking out as well. It feels like there's a lot of teams behind the 8 ball, and if you didn't dive in on the portal early, it feels like it's a sort of situation where you snooze, you lose.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a priority prioritization failure with a lot of these teams on the team building side, which I think is eventually going to emphasize the need for general managers, right? Because what we're starting to see is everybody, all these big programs that are traditional blue bloods, whether it's Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, insert name here of a big time program that has that rich basketball history. Well, those programs missed out on some top end guys because they were focused on other top 10 guys. It's not like high school recruiting anymore where you get a full on, 1 year, 2 year, maybe 3 or 4 year runway to sell your team, sell your program, sell the player to come, be attracted to you as a coach and really shell out for that type of guy during that time period. You've got a small window to make an impact, and guys don't want to miss out on money when they're in their 20s. You've got to throw something in their face from that standpoint. And because of that, you see those early decisions. Once that decision is made, a lot of those players are going to be fine with it because the dollar amounts that are going to be thrown out around there are going to be in the same ballpark of one another. And so, again, you want to talk about another ever evolving sort of meta or adjustment to the team building aspect of the sport. It's not only just, being in on the right guys and throwing the right money at these guys, but you have to cast a wide net. You've got to be strategic, and you got to pick the spots on those players that maybe are a little bit more unheralded because there's less competition to actually attract them to your program.
Yep, no question about it. And I do think that it's so big. And what I've noticed as well is some of these coaches, they try to recruit guys that they played against during the regular season as well. I've noticed it so many times where you find maybe a coach at insert your power conference here, they played against insert your lower mid-major here, and oh, guess what? That lower mid-major that they beat up on, that coach brings them in. So that's been a lot of fun to be able to take a look at as well. And just how have you been taking a look at some of these teams trying to be able to build chemistry with that way? Because I honestly don't think that that's the world's worst idea. It's sort of a way for some of these power conference teams to be able to scout and recruit some of these guys. And I do think that that's so important in this day and age, even if it's not familiarity with the program or the specific style, just to have some sort of a blueprint, because we've seen a lot of teams where the chemistry has just went oh so wrong.
Yeah, 100%. And I think from the standpoint of that, what's interesting is obviously now we're kind of reaching a point where tampering might be at an all-time high behind the scenes.
No, you don't say.
We'll see how that ends up getting addressed. But to your point, there are a lot of players who their final game of their literal college career at that school, they jump to the school that they lost to. So it's kind of a funny little thing that you can draw the, in between the lines on. But, from that standpoint too, of kind of to your point, playing top end mid majors and how does that weed out, sort of the potential future prospects that you can have for a team? I think it does matter. I think if you're going to one of these, invitational tournaments, yeah, you can go to one of these ones like the Players Era where it's a bunch of high major teams all in one bucket. Or you can mix it up, go to Maui or go to some of these other tournaments where there's a lot of really talented mid-majors involved and get a real lay of the land, lay of the talent space out there. And, whether or not that actually happens because of strength of schedule and whatever else happens, the politics behind the whole narrative of, hey, we have to win our non-con games because our conference is so difficult. We'll see what actually happens in terms of high majors playing other mid-majors. But I think there's definitely a strategical advantage of doing so. And if your whole thing is just, hey, we're going to play them in the tournament, hopefully, I wish you the best of luck on that.
Yep, I really do as well. And we have seen a lot of wildness this offseason, a lot of guys staying at their respective schools, a lot of transfers, and it's all been absolutely crazy. And I think that we've highlighted a few schools that have had a great offseason, no doubt about it. Florida, the bad side of it, looking at ULSU, looking at Kentucky. But when it comes to some of these other teams, are there a few that stand out right now as to just teams in general that you're feeling either bullish or bearish on, that you just feel like they've either done a great job here in the transfer portal, retaining their own, or vice versa, that haven't necessarily gotten the attention that they should?
I think there's a lot of teams, and obviously we've talked about a handful of them. I feel really great about what Louisville's done in the portal because they've fallen on some really hard times as a program, and even during this Pat Kelsey stretch of kind of rejuvenation and winning again, they still aren't back to the Louisville of old. And it kind of feels like with this portal class, they said, hey, no more waiting around. Let's go try to make it happen happen. We know that we can buy talented players. We have the funding. Let's go see what we can do. But I think a team that when you look at just kind of the building point, I always look at those year 2 coaches, those year 3 coaches, kind of like what Pat Kelsey is up against right now as a year 3 head coach, trying to build something past where they've already accomplished so far. I look at a year 2 head coach in Jai Lucas for Miami. And from the portal standpoint, they've obviously been very, very active. And I think they've been active in a lot of ways that are going to truly benefit them. It's not like they're just stacking scores on the roster, hoping that they can find some guys that work out. It kind of feels deliberate where you look at the size that they're adding. You look at the guard play that they're adding. I appreciate a lot of it because last year when you did look at the size, look at their defense down low near the rim, that kind of felt like the weak spot. They went out there and dressed that. They got Samoto Cirel from Georgia, who I think is one of the better rim protectors in the entire sport. So year 2, Jai Lucas as kind of that leaping point again for Miami. I'm kind of bullish on what they've done so far.
I am as well. And how much do you just take a look at that entire, shall we say, middle to bottom of the ACC? Because I actually like what Boston College has done, bringing in Luke Murray, actually having presentable players at this point. I don't think they're going to be like some sort of a 25-plus win team or anything like that, but I thought that they made some nice moves. Syracuse, Pittsburgh has signed like 500 million guys. I don't know how that's going to work out, but they sure have signed guys. So there's that. SMU is starting to get on the board. I feel like the entire ACC is looking themselves in the mirror and realizing that they've got to shape up because it's been rough.
And obviously there's a team like an NC State in the mix there too, which kind of got dealt the worst possible hand with their coach jumping ship for LSU and not really having the ability to kind of build on the season that they had last year. We'll see what it looks like, in terms of kind of a new regime, new fresh start. And obviously the portal era is almost going to give you a hard reset anyway. But yeah, to your point, when you look at the rest of kind of the middle and the bottom tier of the ACC, I think there's a lot of teams right now that kind of fit the bill of how do we take that next step, not just coast where we're at. And I look at a team like a Stanford, for example, which it's one of those schools where it's kind of like Northwestern. It's a hard academic standard to get approved for and get to players. And it's hard to recruit when you're talking about the ACC and not a lot of funds available for the athletic department. A team like this, it calls into question when you're seeing all these teams take these strides, add these players, add fresh new coaches and Odom, Pat Kelsey, so on and so forth. Where does that leave a team like a Stanford, which is really not doing much of anything at all? I don't think it leads them in a good spot. And so if you have this middle of, say, NC State, Stanford, I would even throw Cal in the kind of the mix of not really going out there and grabbing that next step. That's going to elevate inherently some of those bottom teams that are wanting to take that next step. I would say absolutely you should feel kind of bullish on that bottom to middle tier of the ACC taking that next stride.
Yep, I feel the exact same way. I thought that they made some great moves in the offseason. It's very much been talked about on this podcast. The bottom Big 12 teams, they've been doing a great job, but not as great of a job as you, my friend. I know that you, Rob, are doing such an amazing job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. You really have your finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything, doing a great job on the baseball front as well. So love the good people at home. Know what's on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking hoops with you, my man. And we're still far out from the actual games. We got so much substance to go the rest of the summer here. And, for those who want to follow my Major League Baseball bets on an everyday basis, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Absolutely. Rob is doing an absolutely incredible job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights, did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such amazing work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today, so a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. UT Rio Grande Valley is up on the board as Devin Pryor. He was over at Oregon this last season, began his career over at Texas, really could never really find his footing with either school. He was averaging right around about 3 points per game the last few seasons. Now, he did see a few starts with Oregon, had his season cut short due to injury, but a little bit of a 6'7" combo player that is a native of the great state of Texas. He has decided that he is going to be playing for UT Rio Grande Valley, and for Grand Valley, they do have a lot of changes that have been made here in the offseason. They had to make a little bit of a coaching adjustment, as now it is going to be Brandon Chambers who takes over, and for Grand Valley, they lose a lot of the roster because when they lose someone like Fennell as their old coach, that does cause for a little bit of, shall we say, issues there. But that said, they've been making the most of a bad situation thus far. They certainly have a lot more pieces that they're going to need to try to get, as they've been a little bit slow going here in the transfer portal. But for UT Rio Grande Valley, I think that this is a nice starting spot for them. A guy that was very highly touted, has some upside, so I do think that this was a good move for them and a step in the right direction. An international man of mystery goes on over to North Carolina as Sayan Kita. He's a true 7-footer from Mali. Many people think that he's a projected lottery pick, according to Jonathan Gavoni, for 2027. He heads on over to North Carolina. He's a 7-footer. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be super versatile in terms of popping up from three, but North Carolina clearly needed a little bit of help on the post. It's been, in my opinion, a little bit of an underwhelming offseason with regards to the overall just lineup for this team, but Kay Brenneman, he was a redshirt last year over at Northwestern, had some upside at 6'11". They're going to hope that he, along with our international man of mystery, is going to be a help out down low. They bring in Terrence Brown, a nice scorer from Utah. Nicole Savadeus is a 6'8/6'9" point forward, so that helps him out a little bit. Matt Abel comes over from NC State with Mike Malone. We're going to find out very, very quickly what he's able to do with this roster. We're going to find out, in my opinion, if he's able to coach or not. It's probably going to take him a little bit of time, but I do think that for North Carolina, this was a very important ad for them. They really, in my opinion, are going to probably need to find that sharpshooter or two, because right now I think that that's very much lacking. And with Mr. Mike Malone coming on over from the NBA ranks, he's probably going to want to have some nice go-to guys that are able to pop it and lock it from three-point range, and there doesn't look to be a lot of that on the roster right now. But that said, I do think that this is a really good ad for them, and I think that he's going to be able to help out right away. This one should definitely be helpful, as Avery Thomas, he was over at Louisiana Tech last season. By the way, Louisiana Tech, they are going to be heading to the Sun Belt Conference, so that's going to be fun, and he's heading on back to Conference USA. He's going to be becoming a part of the Kennesaw State Owls. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. And for Kennesaw State, this is always a team that's looking to build themselves around really good low post play, being able to hit the boards. 9 points, 7.2 rebounds per game for Thomas last season. He's only about 6'7" or so not necessarily the most intimidating man in the world with regards to raw size, but I do like this pickup for Kennesaw State. They've been able to make a few pickups here in the offseason. They lose R.J. Johnson, their main point guard, and he really stepped up after a whole Simeon Cottle situation last season, but still, they bring in CJ Beaumont. He's a 6'8", little bit of a combo player that comes over from Sam Houston State. I think that he fits the system well. Chris Parker was over at Central Florida at 6'9". He's solid. Jacoby Hill comes over from Jacksonville State. He should be able to help run the point. I do think that for Kennesaw State, they're putting together a nice offseason thus far, and I don't know if they quite make it back to the NCAA tournament. There's going to be a lot of competition out there in Conference USA, but like what I'm seeing out of them right now, and I think that they're very much staying true to their style of being able to hit the post and being able to hit the boards very, very well. For Chancey Willis, what's up, Willis? He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Kent State. He last season was playing over at Minnesota, but where this man was really able to thrive was 2 seasons ago when he was over at Western Michigan. He was limited to 7 games this past season over at Minnesota, and he was a starter in those 7 games for Minnesota. Problem was, he got injured. In the small sample size, he was averaging about 6.5 points, generating about 2.4 steals per game, but you go back to what he did in the MAC over at Western Michigan 2 seasons ago. Again, only played 24 games, was limited due to injury, but 17 points, 5.8 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. Not a great three-point shooter at 28.5% from 3. Now, Kent State, they were able to turn over a little bit of a new leaf with their three-point shooting last season, so he's not necessarily going to be able to fit there, but you've got Laf Diouf, who comes over from Chattanooga. He's got some versatility. Cameron Williams at 6'8". He's a nice combo player. They obviously lose Delreco Gillespie, but God's love, Noah Dubé, who comes over from Eastern Michigan. He should be able to help out down low. For Kent State, it feels like they're getting back to their roots a little bit more, more, because with Willis, he does a nice job in terms of generating turnovers. When Kent State has really been at full force, they do a nice job in terms of being able to grab some steals, in terms of being able to create defensive havoc. They were absolutely terrible on defense last season, and being able to get that swagger back, I think it's big. KJ Perry, he last season was over at BYU, really just didn't see the floor whatsoever. He redshirted, but he's decided that he's heading on over to Fresno State, and Fresno State is another team I think is really starting to collect a little bit of talent. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be amazing for this coming season, but so he's a 6'3" guard that was a former 4-star guy. We're going to need to see what he's going to be able to do, but he should be able to run the point for this team. Quentin Rhymes is a guy that comes over from Nebraska. He's able to pop it from three. Drongus Lungu, he's a 6'6", a little bit of point forward that comes from UT Martin. Brady Henjai at 6'11", he was great on the boards for a Cal Baptist team that dominated down low. Brian Amunke, who comes over from Wichita State, he should be able to give you some shooting as well after Fresno State was terrible with their three-point shooting last year. I feel like some great moves have been made, and I do applaud these as well. Keyshawn Fisher, he last season was playing over at Detroit, and he has decided that he is going to be heading over to Winthrop. And for Fisher, he was averaging about 5.5 points per game, shot 27.5% from distance, 6'7", a little bit of a combo player. Now for Winthrop, it's going to be a little bit of a new look team because they really ran things a lot through Logan Duncombe last season, and they were able to just hone in and take much better care of the ball this past season. They are going to be having some question marks with regards to that point guard spot, and I don't know if they've necessarily addressed all of their questions in terms of the transfer portal, but they bring in a pair of guys from North Dakota in Anthony Smith and George Nachavili, and then you've also got Mikey Davis, who comes over from IU Indy, who was just playing at warp speed. So they certainly do have the personnel, in my opinion, to be able to play that up-tempo style. We'll see if they're actually able to do it or not. And then for College of Charleston, no doubt it's going to be a little bit of a new dawn and a new day because now they're under the tutelage of John Gross, but I like this pickup for them. Max Green, he comes on over from Northwestern. Well, he was over at Northwestern. He was more of an ancillary guy for the team. He was averaging right in that neighborhood about 4.3 or so points per contest. When he was over at Holy Cross, he was able to be a nice double-figure scorer 2 years ago at Holy Cross. 15 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shot 38% from three, closer to about 34% three-point shooting this last year over at Northwestern. Clearly just couldn't necessarily find that, shall we say, big-time role with the team. But that said, I do think that this Charleston system is going to fit them very well. We saw what John Gross was able to do with a lot of versatility over at Akron the last 2 seasons. And for Charleston, I really like the moves that they made here in the offseason. Picking up Gross was obviously a really good add. Eli Ellis coming on over from South Carolina. Ben Bradford is a guy that was a top scorer over at Charlotte. Now you add in their Green. Braden Pierce is a 7-footer that didn't see a lot of playing time over at Villanova, but I think that he should be able to find a role with this team. I really think that they are getting it right thus far, and that's a good one for them. And I like this one for Memphis. I haven't loved what Memphis has done here over the last few seasons, but Luke Almondover, he was averaging 14 points, shot right around about 33 or so percent from three, was able to throw in there a few boards, but he lands at Memphis. He had some very nice highlight reel dunks. This is just a freak athlete in general. And over the last 48 to 72 hours, I actually like some of the moves that Memphis has made. Braden Cummings is coming on over from Pittsburgh. Jerry Dang is a little bit of an upside guy that comes over from NC State, but picking up Jaden Reed, who is a part of a Northwestern team that was one of the best teams in terms of not turning the ball over in all of college basketball, is big because for Memphis, the issues with them for so long has been turnovers. If they could just run some clean offense, I really thought that they would have just a much better team in general. Being able to add in there Green, I think that that's big for them. Now you add in there a guy in Almondover, who was a part of a Southeast Missouri State team that always was solid in terms of generating turnovers, was pretty solid on the boards. They do the little things well. This is great for them. So finally with Memphis, some good moves. I mentioned this in passing, but Brady Henjai did officially commit to Fresno State over the last 24 hours as well. He was a guy that, while he was over at Cal Baptist, 5 points, 5 rebounds, so a part of that nice Fresno State haul. So I love what they're doing right now, and I do think that the arrow is very much trending northward on them. This is a good one for Gonzaga. Basamba Diop, he comes on over from Arizona State. Arizona State, for the second straight year, they lose a really nice freshman big man. Last season, obviously, we saw what happened, and you saw the injuries that went down in general, so maybe it wasn't the biggest loss that they did lose that dominator in Jaden Quantance, but in this past season for Diop, he was really the lone guy that was able to give this team some consistent production down low. 13.5 points, 6 boards, 2 blocks per contest. He's able to pop it a little bit from 3 at 31%, but we saw with Gonzaga, typically a team has all gas, no breaks with regards to their offense. They were very much a defense-oriented team when they had Braden Huff go down with an injury, and I still think that they're probably going to need to add a little bit more offense in order to get back to where they were. And they also have Isaiah Harwell, who's a guy that's also going through the NBA draft process, coming on over from Houston. So they need to add a few pieces because they were a really old team last season, but now they've got things sorted out. Down low, Diop, a very hot commodity out there in the portal. I think that this is a nice add for them. You've got Rich Briscoe. He last season was over at Akron. He has decided that he's going to be going to Ryder. Like, at this point, any ads for Ryder is good because they were absolutely terrible last year. Briscoe just didn't see a lot of playing time in general. At 6'8", he was having about a point per contest. He's more of a back-to-basket, low-post guy, but for Ryder, they had absolutely nothing with regards to offense last season. I don't necessarily know what his offensive game is, but he should be able to help them out on the boards. That was the one thing that Ryder wasn't absolutely terrible at last season. They were able to grab a few boards, and they were able to be okay down low, but for Ryder, they've been able to pick up a few guys here in the offseason. This is the latest of them, Ty Bevins. He comes on over from George Washington to try to help out the guard spot. I still think that it's going to be a very rough season for them, but hey, at the very least, they're trying. They're adding guys, and that's going to be able to help them out a little bit more moving forward. And then this one is going to be of help. Isaac Finelson, he was over at Hawaii last season. He's going on over to Western Michigan. Khalil Fennell, going on over from UT Rio Grande Valley to Western Michigan. It's clear that they are investing in this program right now with Western Michigan. They bring over a lot of guys from UT Rio Grande Valley from a season ago. He's got coming along with them Jalen Washington, a nice scorer at about 5'11". He's going to be able to help run the point with Julian Gomez, who is a little bit more of a three-point shooter. Augustus Cladunas, he was a 14-plus point per game scorer over at VMI 2 seasons ago. Rob Lee, he was in the Southland competing up against Fennell. He comes over from Lamar after a nice season. Now, this is the latest of them, and I really do think that they are getting it right with regards to a lot of these ads, because the one thing that I thought that they needed was a little bit more with regards to being able to hit the boards for Finelson. He was a part of a Hawaii team that was really good defensively, shot 39% from 3 at 6'6", 9 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. He's going to be able to bring that tough defensive tenacity as well. So I really like what Western Michigan has done here in the offseason. I don't know if they're going to quite be a top 3 team in the MAC, but they certainly, after being way down there in the MAC over the last few seasons, going to be very much improved, and they've done a great job here in the offseason. Samson Riley, he was over at Quinnipiac last season. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart has lost a lot of their top guys from a season ago, and they were a nice three-point shooting team, and boy, oh boy, were they bad defensively last season, but they were a nice three-point shooting team last season, and for Sacred Heart, it's been a little bit slow going for them here in the transfer portal, but I think that this is a really good ad for them, and it finally allows them to be able to get on the board with a little bit of something, as he's the guy that over at Quinnipiac last season wasn't necessarily like a primary guy or anything like that, but he was able to give them 4.5 points per game, and he very much fits the system. Shot 48% from three-point range. Now, I recognize that it's not like he took a billion threes, but still, 37 out of 77, that's a pretty good sample size of three-point shooting. Defense is probably going to be leaving something to be desired because that's what always happens with the Sacred Heart team, but still, love this move for them. And then I think that this is a good one for Tulsa. Macone Emery, he last season was playing over at Delaware. He has decided that he's going to go to a Tulsa team that was a top 10 team nationally in terms of points scored on a per possession basis last year. Delaware, they were a pretty rock-solid offensive team. They played very slow and control with Emery, who had 6'8". He's able to pop it a little bit from 3, only shot about 28.5% from the outside, but with losing some of the guys like Ian Smichael and company that were so good on the glass, they needed to be able to have a little bit of big man. 11.5 points, 6.5 boards, steal per contest. I think that he's going to be a pretty good fit with this system. Now for Tulsa, I do think that their work cannot be done because they're coming off of a really nice season, and the only other player that they have coming over is Brent Moss, and they are losing quite a bit of that backcourt from a season ago, but some nice starting spots. Now they need to go out there, get themselves another guard or two to be really feeling good about themselves. Noah Benny, he last season was over at Sam Houston State, and he has decided that he is going to be going on over to Alabama State. Alabama State all of a sudden getting on the board with a few transfers, and for Benny, he was a guy from the great state of Texas that had a little bit of fanfare coming out of high school. He redshirted last season, so it's a little bit of a jury's out situation with him. It's looking like he's probably going to be a little bit more of a primary point guard for this team, not necessarily a guy that was known for popping it and locking it from 3, but still, they are also bringing in Amari Brown, who was a nice scorer over at Southern Indiana last year. He should be playing a little bit more off the ball. Those two guys can work together, so what this Alabama State team has been able to do over the last 48 to 72 hours has actually been pretty solid, and it does feel like they're going to be a team that returns to a little bit of prominence out there in the SWAC. You've got Cam Martin, who was over at Sam Amford last season. He has decided that he is going to go to Denver, and for Denver, as we know, this was a team that last season, boy oh boy, were they good on offense, and boy oh boy, were they bad on defense, and I think that this is a guy that's going to be able to fit the system. For Cam Martin, he really had his best year when he was over at Long Beach State 2 seasons ago. On that team, he was averaging 8.5 points, shot about 34.5% from three-point range, nearly a steal per contest. This last season was a little bit more of a guy that came out off the bench for Stanford. 5.5 points, 2 boards, shot more like 33% from three. Was part of a pair of teams that weren't necessarily great defensively, so he's certainly going to be able to uphold that tradition unlike any other for this Denver team. They've also got Babakir Menji, who is a 7-footer coming over from UMKC, and they also brought in their CJ Hyland, another guy that popped it from three over at Western Carolina, played no defense. Trey Caddy was a solid 6'8" combo player over at North Florida that also played no defense whatsoever, so Denver looking like they're staying very true to their roots, so good on Denver for that. You've got Matija Samar, hopefully I said that correct. He has decided that he is going to UMKC. For UMKC, the Marvin Menzies era was just absolutely terrible. They are looking to just wash away the stench of that, I think is the best way of being able to put it, but I do think that they've been able to pick up a few solid guys. They bring in Sebastian Hartman, who was over at Chattanooga this last season. Now, Samar, he's a 6'6", little bit of a combo player that just had a tough time getting out there on the floor for Oregon State, but I do think that he's going to be able to come in there, be able to give you a little bit of something right away, and I do think that this is going to be a good, solid add for them. Again, we're going to need to see a little bit of what he's able to do moving forward because he's a little bit of an unknown coming on over from Oregon State where he just wasn't able to see a lot of minutes, but should be able to help them out a little bit there. Portland's Keenan Kenzie, he decided that he is going to be landing with Nevada, and for Nevada, they've been able to have a few nice pickups here over the last 24 to 48 hours. It's been a little bit slow going for them in the portal, but Saman Majak, the 7-footer, that just didn't see a lot of minutes over there at Memphis. He's coming on over. They also added Style Phipps over the last 48 or so hours as well. He was over at Pepperdine. He was that do-it-all guy, was able to give them 5 assists, double figures. Not a guy that's going to go into just inferno mode from three-point range, but now you've got Kenzie, who is a nice scorer for the team. He was able to average about 11 points, 7 rebounds per game, began his career over at San Diego. Not a guy that's really going to go bombs away from three, and Nevada's probably going to need to address the three-point shooting a little bit more, but he was a good defensive player, was able to average a little bit over a steal per contest, and it was a Nevada team that, while they did a lot of things well last season, they weren't necessarily a team that forced a lot of, shall we say, defensive pressure or anything like that, so he should be able to help out on that front, and I do think that this is going to be good in terms of making this team just a little bit more well-rounded in general for this upcoming season. Elijah Jones, he last season was playing over at UTEP. He has decided that he's going to be going to George Mason. For George Mason, while this is a very good defensive team year in and year out, not a team that necessarily generates a lot of turnovers, so Jones coming over from a defense-oriented team that was based around generating turnovers over at UTEP should be able to help them out, and at 6'8", he had really good versatility, and keep in mind for George Mason, they do lose a lot of that, shall we say, guard play from a season ago. Jahari Long is now gone. They lose Corey Mincy, and for Jones, he really shined last year with about 13 points, 5.5 boards, and he shot 38.5% from three-point range. And George Mason, for the second straight offseason, they've done a really good job of being able to add talent here in the portal. They've got Emmett Adir, who is a double-figure scorer over at Loyola Maryland. Michael Marcus Jr., he should be able to help man things down low, coming on over from Appalachian State. I like the fact that they added Mackay Valentine over the last 48 or so hours. Baraka Okoji, he actually began his career over at George Mason, really excelled over at Mercer, and Lillian Marvel was an over 50% three-point shooter last season over at UNC Greensboro, so really like the way that these guys have been able to really fortify this roster, and it feels like they're going to have really good depth in general, so really applaud these moves. Amani Ziegler, he last season was over at Ball State. He's heading on over to Boston College. He was a guy that was able to average 12.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. Like, he was really good in terms of his overall versatility. He was on a bad Ball State team last season, but this guy was able to shine, and for Boston College, they've got it right here in the offseason. They add Luke Murray as their coach, finally a competent coach over here. They add Jacob Furphy, who he's going to be coming on over from Connecticut along with Murray, where he was an assistant. Brandon Benjamin was a double-double machine over at Fairfield. Kobe Duggan at his peak over at Campbell during conference play 2 seasons ago. He was averaging 18 plus points per game. JB Frankel is able to bomb it from 3. Ernest Shelton, he's able to give you really good defense. This is going to be a very well-rounded team. I don't know if they're going to be playing fast, if they're going to be playing slow. Luke Murray is going to have options, but with coming over from UConn, you know that he's going to want his guys to play good defense. Luke Hunger, he comes over from George Washington as well. This is a talented roster here with Boston College. Are they going to be competing for like 25 plus wins or anything like that? No, that's a little bit far-fetched, but still, I really like what these guys have been able to do in the offseason. One of the most improved teams, in my opinion, among the power conference level teams. And then for UConn, they get on the board with this add Niles Malchowski. He began his career over at Central Florida. This last year, he was really able to excel over with Wofford. He was averaging nearly 18 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists, shot 39% from three-point range. I recognize that Wofford wasn't necessarily playing the world's greatest defense, but he's used to playing at a power conference level. He was beginning his career over at Central Florida, and for UConn, they returned so much from a season ago as well, and even though they're going to be without Solo Ball for this upcoming season, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, and obviously you do lose one of those heart and soul guys from the last few seasons because we all know what Alex Karaban meant to this team. It is big that they are going to be adding just a few guys in general. That should be able to help fortify and be able to replenish what is being lost down low, because you also lose Sheriff Reed. That's a little bit of an issue as well, but you're able to address that with adding in there a guy like a Melchowski, who's able to be a nice two-way player, and then additionally with getting Nicholas Nurkamina, who is a former top 25 recruit at 6'8". He's got good versatility. It's going to be a UConn team that's going to be really scary with that regard. You've got Silas Emery, who's coming back as well. So for UConn, they've really been able to have themselves a nice offseason, and we've got Ryan Archibald, who has decided that he's going to be heading on over to Loyola Chicago. This is a really nice ad for them. He was able to average about 6.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game over his tenure at Stanford. I recognize that things were a little bit up and down for him. I expected him to take maybe a little bit more of a step forward this past season. He was only averaging about 6 points, 4 boards per contest, but did shoot 35% from three at 6'6". He should be able to fit this defensive system that Loyola Chicago has, and it's very clear. Loyola Chicago after last season, boy, I mean, man, that was not the way that you want to honor Sister Jean, to say the least. They have really decided that they're going to go out there and spend. Now, I like their moves that they made last offseason, and it toilet bowled, but that said, I do think that they've done a little bit better job here. They're sort of going fire and ice style. Donald Hand was a double-figure scorer that did a bit of everything over at Boston College. Malik Diallo is a big man that comes over from TCU. That's a little bit of a gamble for them. Eddie Ricks, he's able to pop it from three at 6'7". He's able to hit the boards. Jason Schofield should be able to help out down low. Desai Nasai, he's able to bomb it from three. Again, they're going to need to implement these pieces a little bit better, be able to get some meshing, because there was absolutely no meshing last season, but I do think that there's some upside here. Stefan Cisic, he was over at Pepperdine this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Ole Miss. Now, I do not think that he is going to be playing too many minutes for Ole Miss, but it's very clear that they needed size. He last season over at Pepperdine, 4.5 points, 2.6 rebounds per game. If he's anything more than a bench piece for Ole Miss, an Ole Miss team that, I mean, really over the last few seasons, they have not been able to have a lot of size. They have not been very good down low whatsoever. Then we have an issue, but at the very least, they made a signing, so congratulations. Jason Fontenot, he last season was over at UC Santa Barbara. He just was limited due to injury. You go back to what he did 2 seasons ago, 10 points, 6 rebounds, steal per contest, shot about 32% from three. This last year, he only played 5 games due to injury, but Rhode Island is looking to buy low. They signed him up, and for this Rhode Island team, boy, it's just been rough under Archie Miller. The fact that he's going to be returning for another year, I'm not sure how to feel about that, because I recognize that they don't want to be paying out a buyout or anything like that, but boy, it has not been good for this Rhode Island team. But they've stuck some money into signing some solid players. Dylan Williamson, double-figure scorer from Towson. He should be able to help out the defense of this team. Mateus Danulis, he was a 6'9" combo player over at UT Martin. Once again, a really good defensive player as well. Fontenot, 2 years ago, Santa Barbara was a solid defense. They weren't last year. Perhaps it was because they didn't have Fontenot for much of the season, but they've done a solid job in terms of being able to supplement this roster. They lose a lot from a season ago, but at some point, it's put up or shut up time for Archie Miller. Right now, he has been shut up, so he's going to need to excel this year. It feels almost like the Bobby Hurley situation over at Arizona State, where it's like, man, I thought this guy was going to get fired years ago. That is now Archie Miller. Arkansas State, they had TJ Caldwell on the roster last season, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to UAB. This is a good ad for UAB. UAB last year was a good defensive team. They did a nice job valuing the ball. They just had no three-point shooting whatsoever. They had Jeremy Alesi to be able to help the defense. He was solid over at Southeast Louisiana last season. Deuce Jones, the deuce is loose. If they're able to get his head on straight, he was a double-figure scorer over at St. Joe's along with LaSalle last season. Now, they had in there a guy in Caldwell who he's used to playing in a very up-tempo system, so if UAB is looking to play fast, because for Andy Kennedy, he just really blends his style according to the roster that he's got. He's going to be able to do a lot with Caldwell, who began his career over at Ole Miss, ironically enough. That's where Kennedy used to coach. He was averaging, Caldwell was, 9.5 points per game over at Arkansas State, 34% three-point shooter. He's able to guard multiple positions at 6'4". Nice versatility. I love this ad for for them, and I do think that UAB, once again, going to be rock solid out there in the American. Evan Basuter, he was at Grand Canyon this last season. He has decided that he's going to be going to Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian has been slow going here in the transfer portal, but this is a guy that comes from a very nice defense-oriented system. Now, is he seeing a lot of minutes this last season? No, he was averaging only about 1 point per game, but I do think that for Abilene Christian, this is going to be a solid add. I think that he's a guy that's going to be able to be a nice piece in a system that is very, very hard to be able to get down, so I like what they have here. For Belmont, obviously, it's been a rough season for them. They lose Casey Alexander. They lose Tyler Lundblade, Sam Mormay, all those rock-solid guys for them. But now they do pick up one of the guys from Indiana, and Alex Risach. He's a 6'4" international man of mystery that just wasn't able to see any minutes whatsoever last year. He's averaging a half a point per game, but a guy that comes over from Serbia, obviously a good three-point shooter. He shot 66.6% from three last year. I say that very jokingly, of course, but for Belmont, they finally get something on the board. They also have Matthew Zobrist, who's coming over from Bradley, who was okay in the limited amount of minutes that he saw over there. So it's very clear that Belmont, they're going to need to fill out a roster, and they're going to need to add some size, because right now they have absolutely no size whatsoever. But hey, that's a step in the right direction for them. And William Kamori, he was over at Northeastern last year. He has decided that he is heading to UNC Wilmington. Wilmington is back at it. They just love adding all these guys from within the CAA conference. They did so last year. I know that it didn't yield an NCAA tournament berth, but they were able to win 25-plus wins with that system. And Kamori, 40% three-point shooter, 13 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Now, with Northeastern, they played a little bit faster last year than UNC Wilmington did, but in the past, Northeastern has been a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. I think that he's going to be very much from a tempo standpoint, being able to fit with this team. For Wilmington, they haven't signed as many guys as they did in the offseason last year. It might be just a little bit slow going, but still, Spencer Elliott comes over from Charlotte. He's a nice guy that is going to be able to fit the system. Talon Petaway, he should be able to run the point coming over from Western Carolina. Trayvon Maddox, he's a 6'7", little bit of a combo player that they're gambling on from Miami, but was highly touted coming out of high school. I do love these ads for them, and I think that they got this one right. And then Maine Justice, he was over at Davidson this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Hawaii for the Rainbow Warriors. They've been able to do a nice job here in the offseason as well. One of the biggest ads is not even an ad whatsoever. Being able to retain Isaac Big Fish Johnson, the true 7-footer, I thought was big for them. Now Justice, he's a guy that was originally from the UK. He was part of the NBA Global Academy. Last season, only about 2 points, 2 rebounds per game at 6'7". He's a little bit of a project, but we have seen Hawaii with international man of mystery. Look at Gaitis Namishka coming over from Xavier. They've been able to have some nice success there. And then additionally for Hawaii, even if this move doesn't pan out, you're bringing their transfer Julo, who is a solid player over at Utah Tech this past season. Boldengo, he was really nice over at UC San Diego at 6'11". He's able to pop it from three. Zach Davidson was leading Northern Arizona in scoring before going down with an injury. Marcus Adams, 2 years ago at CSUN, was tremendous. Ron Don is solid down low coming over from Seattle. So love the moves that is being made by Hawaii, and love the moves that we're making on this podcast, because our moves are making a podcast every single day. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry Sam, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks to our guy, Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, for joining me in last segment, coming at you guys every single day on this podcast when we get in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day here in the offseason, looking at the news and notes of college basketball. And once these rosters get sorted out, I'm going to give you guys a specialized conference preview for every one of the conferences as well, so be on the lookout for that, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.